Her sleeve, as it powered up the familiar glow, illuminated her fingers, momentarily pushing back the cold that gnawed at her skin. The screen loaded sluggishly, but eventually, the messages and missed calls from unknown numbers blinked to life. Most were automated notifications, but she still checked, hoping for a chance, any opportunity, to escape this cycle of survival. Meanwhile, across the city, Keanu Reeves sat in his sunlit villa, oblivious to the story that was about to intertwine with his own. He had recently decided to hire a new housekeeper, someone to help maintain the estate while he focused on his projects. The agency had sent over a list of candidates, and Anna's name had been among them. Her resume was modest, previous housekeeping jobs, no listed address, but something about it caught his eye. Maybe it was the neatly written cover letter, devoid of embellishment yet carrying an unspoken plea for stability. The day of the interview arrived, and Anna, having borrowed clean clothes from a local shelter, stepped through the gates of Keanu's estate. She tried to maintain her composure, though inside, her nerves twisted with anxiety. She needed this job, needed it more than anyone here could possibly understand. When Keanu met her, he was struck by her quiet humility. She wasn't like the other applicants, who spoke of experience in grand estates. Anna was different. Polite, reserved, and tired. There was something in her eyes, an exhaustion that couldn't be faked. Days later, after she was hired, Keanu started to notice things. She never left in a car. She never spoke about home. Then, one evening, as he was heading out, he spotted a familiar figure tucked away in the driver's seat of an old, beat-up sedan near the property's gates. The windows were covered in frost. The silhouette inside was wrapped in a threadbare blanket. It hit him then. The realization was swift, heavy. His housekeeper, this quiet, hard-working woman, was living in her car. Keanu could have handled it like any employer, offered help through formal means, kept his distance. But that wasn't who he was. Instead, the next morning, he left a note on her workstation, simple yet life-changing. "You're not alone. There's a guest house on the property. Stay as long as you need. No questions asked. K." When Anna found it, she stared for a long time, rereading the words over and over. Disbelief, gratitude, relief, all of it crashed over her in waves. No one had ever done something like this for her. Not without expecting something in return. But Keanu wasn't like most people. That night, for the first time in months, she slept in a warm bed, under a real roof, without the hum of a freezing engine lulling her to sleep. And the world? The world would soon learn of this kindness, not because Keanu wanted recognition, but because true generosity never stays hidden for long. Her hair twice just to make sure it was truly clean, the lather thick and fragrant, such a stark contrast to the cold, stale air of her car. As the water ran over her skin, she let herself savor the moment, feeling like, for the first time in months, she was shedding more than just dirt. She was washing away exhaustion, despair, and the weight of survival. With no time to linger, Anna quickly dried off, securing her hair in a neat bun as instructed. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, almost unrecognizable. The fresh scent of soap clung to her, her uniform looked crisp, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged somewhere, not just another invisible figure drifting through the city. As she stepped out, Gordon was waiting, checking his watch. He gave her a once-over, then a curt nod. "Better," he muttered. "Come with me." Anna followed him through the winding corridors of the villa, her shoes clicking against the polished floors. The space was breathtaking, high ceilings, grand chandeliers, expensive artwork on every wall. It felt surreal to be here, working inside a place that looked like something out of a dream. Her first task was simple, dusting the library. She moved carefully, mindful not to disturb the shelves lined with first editions, each book worth more than everything she had ever owned combined. She ran her fingers lightly over the spines, absorbing the weight of history in them, allowing herself a small moment of awe before getting back to work. Hours passed as she moved through the house, adjusting to the rhythm of the staff. No one spoke much, but they acknowledged her with nods, and she took comfort in that. Despite the supervisor's harsh introduction, the other maids weren't unkind. There was an unspoken camaraderie, a shared understanding of the work they did. Then, as she was gathering fresh linens from the storage room, a voice startled her. "You must be the new housekeeper." Anna turned swiftly, her heart lurching. Standing in the doorway was Keanu Reeves himself. He was casually dressed, nothing like the movie star persona the world knew. Just a simple black sweater, jeans, and a kind expression that immediately put her at ease. "Yes, sir," she answered softly, unsure of how formal she needed to be. He smiled. "Keanu is fine." His eyes lingered on her for a moment, not in a scrutinizing way, but as if he was piecing something together. "Have we met before?" Anna felt her pulse quicken. Did he recognize her? Had he seen her car near the property? "No, sir. I mean, Keanu. I don't think so." She swallowed hard, gripping the linens tightly. He nodded slowly but didn't press. "Well, welcome aboard. Let me know if you need anything." With that, he walked off, leaving Anna standing there, her mind racing. Something in his voice told her he wasn't entirely convinced. And she had a feeling this wasn't the last time they'd speak. Staring at the bracelet in her palm, her mind racing. Of all the places, of all the people, she was working at his villa. And now, she held something that clearly belonged to him. A whirlwind of thoughts spun in her head. Should she turn it in immediately? Would they even believe her? She had only just started this job. What if they assumed she had stolen it? She tightened her grip on the bracelet, feeling the cold metal press against her skin as if grounding her in the moment. No. She couldn't let doubt creep in. Taking a deep breath, Anna straightened her uniform and made her way back inside, her steps steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She asked one of the senior maids where she could find Mr. Reeves, carefully masking the nervousness in her voice. The woman gave her a curious glance, but gestured towards a hallway leading to a private lounge. Standing before the large wooden door, Anna hesitated. She took another breath, steeling herself, and knocked lightly. "Come in," a voice called from inside. Pushing open the door, Anna stepped in and immediately felt the shift in atmosphere. The space was warm, intimate, not grand like the rest of the villa, but lived in. And there, seated casually on a leather couch, was Keanu Reeves himself. He looked up from a book, his expression curious but kind. Anna cleared her throat, forcing herself to speak. "Excuse me, sir, I mean, Keanu," she corrected quickly, recalling his preference. "I was cleaning the pool, and I found this." She extended the bracelet towards him, her fingers trembling slightly. Keanu's gaze dropped to the piece of jewelry in her hand. His brows furrowed, and for a moment, he simply stared. Then, a slow, almost disbelieving smile crossed his face as he reached out to take it. "Wow," he murmured, turning the bracelet over in his fingers. "I thought I lost this months ago." Anna swallowed. It was at the bottom of the deep end. I had to fish it out with some tools." Keanu chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, that's some dedication." He looked up at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "What's your name?" "Anna," she said softly. "Anna." He repeated it like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. Then, after a beat, he nodded. "You're new here, right?" "Yes," she admitted, suddenly feeling small under his gaze. "Just started today." Keanu studied her for a moment longer, then leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Most people wouldn't have gone through that much effort," he said finally. "And some wouldn't have turned it in at all." Anna bristled slightly at the implication but kept her composure. "It didn't belong to me," she said simply. Something in the way she said it made Keanu's expression shift, like he understood there was more to her story. He didn't press, but instead, he gave her a genuine smile. "Well, Anna, I owe you one." She quickly shook her head. "No, I was just doing the right thing." He chuckled again, this time with something softer behind it. "That's rare these days." Anna nodded politely, sensing her cue to leave. She turned to go, but just as she reached the door, Keanu's voice stopped her. "Wait." She turned back, heart pounding. "Have you had lunch?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. It was simple, casual, but it felt like something more. Her stomach twisted, not with hunger, but with the realization that she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a proper meal. I'm fine," she lied. Keanu's lips twitched like he knew. "Come on," he said, standing up. "Let's get you something to eat." And just like that, Anna's life took another unexpected turn. That she had done the right thing, embarrassment over her clumsy intrusion, and something else, something warm and unfamiliar. It wasn't just that Keanu hadn't been angry. It was the way he had looked at her, the way he had listened. In that brief exchange, he had treated her not just as a maid, but as a person, as if her words, her life, actually mattered. By the time she reached the back entrance, her hands were still trembling, but for a different reason. She busied herself with her next task, scrubbing the marble countertops in the kitchen with an intensity that had nothing to do with cleanliness and everything to do with calming her racing thoughts. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work, setting tables, polishing silverware, preparing the villa for the evening's event. She kept her head down, avoiding unnecessary interactions, but every now and then, she caught herself glancing towards the main house, wondering if Keanu had already forgotten about their brief exchange. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Anna had convinced herself that it was just a passing moment, a strange and surreal blip in an otherwise ordinary shift. She was nobody in his world, just another temporary worker who would be gone in a few days. But as she was gathering her things to leave for the night, a voice stopped her. "Anna." She froze, turning slowly. Keanu stood there, hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed but his gaze intent. "I didn't get a chance to thank you properly," he said. Anna blinked, unsure how to respond. "You already did, Mr. Reeves." "Keanu," he corrected, the corner of his mouth twitching. "And I mean it. What you did, it wasn't just honest, it was thoughtful. Not a lot of people would have gone out of their way like that." She swallowed, feeling that unfamiliar warmth creep back in. It was just the right thing to do. "Maybe," he said, tilting his head slightly, steadying her. "But I get the feeling doing the right thing hasn't exactly made life easy for you." The words hit her harder than she expected. There was no pity in his voice, no condescension, just quiet understanding. Anna dropped her gaze, suddenly uncomfortable. "I should go." But Keanu wasn't done. "Do you have a ride?" She hesitated. "I'll walk." He frowned. "It's late. Let me call a car for you." "No, really," she insisted. "I don't live far." That wasn't a lie, exactly. Her car was parked nearby. Keanu steadied her for a moment, and for a terrifying second, she thought he might insist. But then he nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. "Okay," he said simply. "But if you ever need anything, help, a job, whatever, you know where to find me." Anna managed a small smile, her throat suddenly tight. "Thank you, Keanu." And with that, she walked away, clutching onto those words like a lifeline, not knowing that this was only the beginning. Of action, a voice called out, one she had hoped to avoid. "Anna?" She turned slowly, dread twisting in her stomach. Keanu stood a few steps away, his eyes scanning her disheveled appearance. His brows furrowed as he took in the state of her uniform, the unmistakable stains, and the way she held herself, shoulders hunched, hands clutching at the fabric as if she could will it clean. She opened her mouth, scrambling for an explanation, but nothing came out. What could she say? That she had been digging through trash for food? That the very uniform she had taken such pride in was now ruined because she was too poor to afford lunch? Keanu didn't ask right away. He just looked at her, his expression shifting from confusion to something softer, understanding. Then, without a word, he stepped forward, took off his blazer, and draped it over her shoulders. The unexpected gesture nearly broke her. Come with me, he said quietly. Anna hesitated, glancing around. Gordon was nowhere in sight, but the other staff members had certainly noticed. Some turned away, pretending not to see. Others watched with quiet curiosity. I can't, she stammered. I need to work. I'll clean up and... Keanu shook his head. You can't work like this. And I doubt Gordon is going to be very understanding. He motioned towards the house. Come inside. We'll figure it out. Anna swallowed hard, torn between pride and desperation. She wanted to refuse, to prove that she could handle this on her own. But the reality was, she couldn't. So, with a deep breath, she followed him. The villa's interior was warm, the air scented with fresh flowers and expensive cologne, a stark contrast to the acrid smell clinging to her uniform. Keanu led her through a hallway, past the curious gazes of a few house staff, and into what appeared to be a private sitting room. Wait here, he said before disappearing through another door. Anna stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, every part of her screaming that she didn't belong here. The soft carpet beneath her feet, the pristine furniture, it was all too much. She gripped the edges of the blazer around her, breathing in the faint scent of something clean and familiar. Minutes later, Keanu returned, carrying a neatly folded set of clothes. Here, he said, setting them on a chair. They should fit well enough. Anna blinked at the clothing, then at him. I can't take this. You can, he said simply. And you will. Her throat tightened. Why are you doing this? Keanu shrugged. Because no one should have to go through what you just did. And because I can help, so why wouldn't I? Anna stared at him, struggling to process the kindness in his words. In all her months of surviving, no one had ever stepped in like this. No one had ever cared enough to notice. Slowly, hesitantly, she picked up the clothes. Thank you, she whispered, barely trusting her voice. Keanu just gave her a small smile. Get changed. Then we'll get you something to eat. And just like that, Anna's world shifted again. Not just because she had been given clean clothes, or because she wouldn't have to go hungry that afternoon, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had seen her, not just as a worker, not just as a struggling woman, but as a person worth helping. Anna's day took a sharp turn for the worse the moment she saw the horrified expression on a guest's face. The woman's eyes widened in shock as she took in Anna's stained uniform and the foul odor that clung to her. Oh my God, the guest exclaimed, loud enough for everyone in the driveway to hear. What is that smell? Heads turned, conversations halted, and within seconds, the air was filled with murmurs of discomfort. Some guests instinctively stepped back, covering their noses, while others exchanged disgusted glances, recoiling from Anna as though she were contagious. Frozen in place, Anna felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Her face burned with humiliation as the well-dressed guests hurried past her, their excited chatter about the upcoming event now replaced with whispered remarks and looks of disdain. Just when she thought the situation couldn't get any worse, she spotted Keanu Reeves stepping out of the villa's grand entrance. Dressed sharply in a tailored suit, he was the picture of effortless elegance, clearly prepared to greet his guests. His warm expression faltered as his gaze landed on the commotion outside, and in an instant, his eyes locked onto Anna. Unlike the others, Keanu didn't react with disgust or shock. Instead, his expression remained composed, assessing the situation with quiet understanding. Without missing a beat, he stepped forward, effortlessly regaining control of the moment. Please, go on inside, he said smoothly, addressing his guests with practiced ease. I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. My staff will handle everything. The guests, reassured by his calm demeanor, hesitated for a moment before moving inside, though a few cast lingering glances at Anna, as if still trying to comprehend how someone like her had ended up in a place like this. Before she could even process what had just happened, a new wave of dread washed over her. Gordon. She barely had time to react before the furious supervisor stormed out from the service entrance, his face an alarming shade of red. What in God's name have you done? he bellowed, his voice carrying across the driveway. Before she could utter a word, his rough hand clamped around her arm, yanking her forcefully toward the back of the house. His fingers dug painfully into her skin as he pulled her along, his grip as unyielding as his rage. "Have you been rolling around in a pigsty?" Eating out of a dumpster, he hissed, his voice laced with pure fury. "I gave you one simple task: go out, get lunch, and return in time for your shift. And somehow, you've managed to make a complete disaster out of it." Anna opened her mouth to explain, but the words got caught in her throat. How could she possibly admit the truth, that she had no money for food, that she had been forced to return to the alley behind the Golden Fork in desperation? That a single misstep had ruined not just her uniform, but possibly her only chance at holding onto this job? Gordon wasn't interested in excuses. He shoved her toward the service entrance, his disgust evident. "Go clean yourself up," he snapped. "And pray that Mr. Reeves doesn't fire all of us because of your incompetence." Anna barely made it to the staff showers before the first tear slipped down her cheek. Inside the tiny, sterile room, she scrubbed at her skin with near-frantic desperation, as if she could wash away not just the garbage, but the shame, the exhaustion, the sheer hopelessness that clung to her like a second skin. When she finally emerged, her replacement uniform was waiting, a size too small, restricting her movements, but she had no choice. Gordon was waiting just outside, arms crossed, eyes scanning her critically. "One more mistake," he said, his voice cold and sharp, "and you're gone." Anna bit the inside of her cheek and nodded, swallowing down the knot of anxiety in her throat. She forced herself to focus, methodically arranging the canapes for the evening's event, trying to push aside the nagging voice that whispered she didn't belong here. Then her phone rang. The second she saw the hospital's number, her stomach twisted with dread. She hesitated before answering, her fingers trembling. "Hello? Is this Anna?" a nurse's voice asked, gentle but urgent. "We're calling about your mother. There's been a complication." The word sent a chill down her spine. "She's experiencing internal bleeding. Her blood pressure is dangerously low. We need to perform emergency surgery immediately. We just need your consent." Anna felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. She barely managed to choke out a yes, her mind spinning as the weight of this new crisis settled onto her shoulders. She had no time to think, no time to explain. She dropped the serving tray and rushed out the door. By the time she reached the hospital, her mother was out of surgery and stable. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. The staggering cost of the procedure loomed over her like a dark cloud. With no job, no savings, and no way to pay, reality hit hard. Knowing she needed to retrieve her belongings, Anna returned to the villa, her heart heavy with dread. Keanu was the first person she saw. His expression was unreadable, concerned, perhaps, but also disappointed. Before she could speak, Gordon appeared, his anger reignited. "You're fired," he declared. "And don't expect a reference." Anna didn't fight it. There was nothing left to say. She simply gathered her things and left, feeling the weight of every lost opportunity pressing down on her. Back in her car, hunger gnawed at her stomach, a cruel reminder of her grim reality. She hesitated before heading back to the alley behind the Golden Fork, ashamed but out of options. But just as she was about to start digging for food, a sleek car pulled up. Keanu Reeves stepped out. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Anna knew he had seen everything. Her shame threatened to crush her, but when he spoke, his voice was filled not with pity, but with understanding. "Why didn't you tell me?" The dam broke. The truth spilled out, her mother's illness, her homelessness, her desperation. Keanu listened. And then he made a decision. "Come with me." In the car, Anna told him everything. And for the first time, Keanu shared his own painful past. His sister had died of leukemia. He understood her struggle more than she could have ever imagined. By the time they arrived back at the villa, Keanu had made another decision. She wasn't just getting her job back. She was going to work directly for him. No agency. No Gordon. And most importantly, he would cover her mother's medical bills through his cancer charity. Gordon's fury was short-lived when Keanu fired the agency on the spot, placing Anna under the guidance of his trusted butler, Micah. For the first time in months, Anna felt secure. That evening, as she moved through the grand hall serving guests, she felt Keanu's eyes on her. When she met his gaze, he gave her an encouraging smile. At the end of the night, he approached her. "How are you feeling?" Anna smiled, genuine and warm. Hopeful. Her life had changed in a single day. That night, as she lay in her new bed, she made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't waste this second chance.